Guys, welcome to She Knows Arsenal. Make sure you guys are liking this video and subscribing to the channel. We're going to be talking about all the latest Arsenal news, a little bit of transfer news. So make sure you guys, like I said, are liking the video and subscribing to the channel. On today's show, we're going to talk a little bit about the Toney transfer saga that has well and truly begun. So we'll talk about that. Odegaard's new deal is imminent. We'll talk about the Arsenal players that have been on international duty and how well or not well they did. The 25-man squad for the Premier League, Arsenal's 25-man squad for the Premier League has been named. We'll talk about that as well. And whether or not Saka is struggling, because I'm seeing a lot of that on the timeline, and I have thoughts. So yeah, go ahead and get in the chat and let me know how you guys are feeling this morning. There's already 40 of you guys watching, so make sure you guys are getting involved. The show is just like, it's about what I think, but it's also about what you guys think. You guys know, no echo chambers. I'm not here to, put out a narrative or anything like that. I like to know what you guys think, and we talk about what I think, what you think, and all those things. So like I said, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and all that good and wonderful stuff. I am feeling good. International break is coming to an end. Arsenal are about to start playing again. Of course, there are some jitters and anxiety around going to Goodison Park because we traditionally don't do very well there. I think the stat is we haven't won there since 2017. And so there is a little bit of like something about that stadium, that team. No matter who's the manager, we struggle to beat that team at Goodison Park. And it's weird because Arsenal haven't beaten any team in the Premier League era more than they've beaten Everton, but we haven't been able to beat them at Goodison Park since 2017. So it's literally about going to that place. And we're talking about this on socials as well as group chats. And I know this isn't something that I was originally going to talk about, but I literally just have to say that, like, are we really title challengers if we feel like we need to change the way that we play or be nervous about Everton? I think Arsenal are kind of like the only team that considers themselves, at least from the fans' point of view, a big club, is super competitive, has the best players on the planet, but feel like certain players in our team cannot play at Goodison Park. I saw a couple of people had Fabio Vieira in their starting 11. Now, personally, for me, Fabio is not somebody that I would start. I think the game state is more important to me than where we're at, if that makes sense. But a lot of people were, you can't play Fabio Vieira at Goodison Park. You can't play Fabio Vieira at Goodison Park. And I'm just like, we're going to have the majority of the possession. And if we don't, something is very, very wrong. I don't know if you guys, like, what your recollection of last season's 1-0 loss to Everton at Goodison Park was. But the way I remember the game is Arsenal had tons of possession. We were sitting on the edge of their box for the majority of the game, and we could not find the pass. We didn't have enough movement to break down their deep block. And then on the other end, they were on transition. And I remember everybody in midfield, Xhaka, Partey, and Odegaard, everybody had a poor game. I don't think that it had anything to do with them being maximum physical PMP. It was just, we just were poor, especially on the ball. And then, they were getting these chances, and I just don't think we were defending that well. With Arsenal and the way that we play, any team that wants to counterattack on us is going to be attacking with numbers, and we're going to have less people back there, and it's going to be basically like one pass into our box. Like, that's just how we play, right? And so I just remember us being more, shitty than usual on transition, even with Xhaka and Partey in the team. And then we got done on one corner where Odegaard was marking Tarkowski, and he just did a terrible job. And so what stands out to me more than anything for Arsenal against Everton is making sure we have our best tallest, strongest defensive line, back there, back line, which probably includes Tomiyasu. And making sure we have the incisiveness, the creativity, and movement in our front five so that we can break down a deep block. And last season, we had Eddie up there, which no shade to Eddie. Eddie has been playing great. But like I've been saying, and I know this is like off on a tangent, this isn't what we're really supposed to be talking about, but it's on my mind, so we're going to talk about it anyway. Eddie, like, I don't care how good Eddie plays, most games I'm going to prefer somebody else. That's just the truth, because we're going to be playing against deep blocks for the majority of the season. Nobody gives us space. Nobody goes toe-to-toe with us. They sit back in a deep block, whether it's home or away, and we have to break that down and then hope we don't get done on the counter, right? And so having Gabriel Jesus in that team, which we did not have last season, I think is going to be important. And then whoever's playing in that left 8 position, they're going to be so important. They're going to be key to unlocking that deep block. I remember Xhaka was really struggling, like, finding the passes. And quite frankly, like, everybody on the left-hand side struggles without Gabriel Jesus. It's just he unlocks everything for that side. So I think whether it's Fabio, whether it's Trossard, whether it's Kai, that player has to be able to find those little seams, has to be able to quick 1-2 passes to move the Everton defense around, and we have to be fluid in our front three. That is so, so, so important. But the idea that Fabio Vieira cannot play at Goodison Park and somehow Kai or Trossard are these physical, monsters that could handle it. No. We need to pick whoever's going to unpick the lock the best. That is how I would go about it. Now, it doesn't have to be Fabio Vieira from the start, but I bet you he will play a part in that game. And he will be just fine, because I just feel like the only 2 games that Arsenal, if we're serious, we should be changing things around in order to, stop the opposition, really, is Man City away and Liverpool away. Those are 2 games where we typically don't have possession. So being out of possession is more important, I think, in those games. At home, we should be able to go toe-to-toe with those teams. We should. But the idea that we should be afraid to play certain guys against Everton, we ain't challenging for no titles talking like that. Like, I'm sorry. Like, there's just no way, because we're going to have the ball. So what we do with it, the 90% of the time that we have it, for me, is more important than what Everton are going to do with the ball for 10%. If we can't handle them on transition with Declan Rice, Saliba, Gabriel, Tomiyasu, Ben White, we don't need to be talking about title challenges. That's just what I'm saying. So yeah, had to get that off my chest, because we're the only team that does this. The only team that considers ourselves to be this elite team, but we don't want to play certain guys against Everton. But we're going to have all the ball. And we should be looking to impose ourselves on Everton, not stop them from doing anything against us. Hugo says Trossard should start at left center mid Sunday, in my opinion. Yo-Yo says it's an Arteta thing. The football gods want him to struggle at his old stomping ground. I didn't think about that. I did not think about that. Good point. So, Sabusiso says Kaiser Chiefs. Yeah, I got this from Soccer Archive. They gave me a couple different things from Kaiser Chiefs. I never really heard about them before that, but this is like so cute. I love it. I know some people are like, cute. Yeah, it's cute. Yo-Yo says long fell under Arteta, especially that we regularly look strangely vulnerable after international breaks, results aside. However, this Everton side is really fragile. Goodison Park is no fortress. And, we do tend to look, and was the Everton game the first game back after, was it one of the first games back after the World Cup? Or, because Eddie was starting, so I'm trying to remember. But we didn't look good. We looked rattled. Like, actually, I will look it up. This is so beyond the point, but this is going to be a longer show anyway, so who cares? You guys don't mind, do you? Okay, so let's see. Arsenal. Everton. Wait, Arsenal versus Everton, or I should have done it the other way. Let's see. Everton won. That game was hell, man. But all I remember was being more concerned about why we couldn't break down this deep block than anything. I'm really that person. I'm like, well, why couldn't we break them down? Like that was pissing me off. But yeah, that was in February. So it was well past World Cup, but obviously Gabriel Jesus was not back. I'm still not sure whether or not that was right after an international break or not. Probably not. But we just didn't look very good. And it says that we had 3 shots on target. They had 4 shots on target. We had 71% possession. They had 30% possession. We had 639 passes. They had 252. Our pass accuracy was 86. Theirs was 71. And that's pretty much, they had 7 corners and we had 5. And that's another thing about, Everton is trying your hardest not to give away dangerous set pieces, like trying not to give them, too many throw-ins right there where the corner flag is, because they are playing Stoke football. Like, and we do typically, I think we typically do struggle with teams that play that style, but I think that's more, for me, it's still more mentality than anything else. We get too shook too quickly and we're not clued in on games like that. I do think you have to earn the right to play. So you don't want to be weak in the challenges and stuff like that. But the back line that we have should not be getting rocked. Like they really should not, It was the early kickoff. Yep. And it was Dyche's first game. So yeah, there was a lot of different caveats there, but we still should be winning. Like, period. Marie says Trossard or Smith Rowe should start at left 8, in my opinion. Vieira would probably be more fluid with Martinelli and Jesus, though. Arsenal, like, I'm more concerned about what we're doing with the ball than what they're doing with it. The only teams that I'm almost have a little bit of fear of when they have possession, because they tend to be really dangerous with it, is like peak Liverpool and Manchester City. We went to Newcastle last season with not our best 11 and Jorginho at the 6, and we won. So this idea that you have to play, the rough, your biggest physical team again. Calm down. Like, we're fine. Relax. It's crazy. So yeah, I'm seeing it already out there. I don't expect Fabio Vieira to start. I think Kai Havertz will start until it's just going to keep going. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to get the best out of Kai Havertz, and maybe that has something to do with Odegaard as well. Kai Havertz will start. I think he's the de facto start anyway, because now that Thomas Partey is injured, what are you going to do? And so, how do you get the best out of him in terms of the other players that you're going to choose? At the moment, like, it has to be Gabriel Jesus, like 110%, There's 134 of you guys in here, which is amazing. Make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel. We are going to pivot to what we were actually going to talk about. I always get on a tangent. The show always ends up being, I have a schedule and I'm like looking at it right now, but it always ends up being me talking to you guys and just going through the comments. No, I need to be more professional. Like, there's just no way. Been doing this for 3 years now, and I'm still just like blah, 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 and you guys just let me do it. you know? So there has been movement on the Ivan Toney transfer saga for probably January. He probably will move on from Brentford in January. Arsenal said to be interested, as well as Manchester United. But Chelsea are currently leading the race for Ivan Toney. That news came out yesterday. I was sitting in the grocery store parking lot, and I looked at my phone, and I was like, of course. Bowley, of course. They're always like transfers. Like, they don't care about what's going on the pitch. They just want transfers. Like, I'm convinced that they are the best at transfers, but once it gets to going on the pitch, it's like whatever. But That I do think is could potentially be a blow for Arsenal if Chelsea are already working behind the scenes. That's what Simon Phillips has said, that there's already been like talk behind the scenes for a January move for Ivan Toney. And so if Chelsea are already kind of like one or two steps ahead, I would imagine that that means that Arsenal are not ready to get into conversations. And I do think, the way that Arsenal operate at the moment, the fact that we can't sell players, move players on quickly, it really stops us from being more proactive in future windows. I think Arsenal are in a position where maybe they can do something in January, but if we absolutely had to, I think we'd be in trouble, just because like we just did not sell enough. And if we wanted to bring in like an Ivan Toney or something like that, he's going to cost 65 million, and I don't know if we even have that. So it's a little bit of a worry that Chelsea has kind of jumped, ahead quite quickly, because this is something that is probably going to be done within the next month or so, and we'll know that he's going somewhere, and that's it. So this is not amazing news for Arsenal. I think Arsenal are interested in Ivan Toney, but a lot of times I do think we are shackled by our past transfer decisions, or not being able to sell, move players on quickly, recoup sales, because there's only going to be a certain amount of time where the Cronkies are going to fund us, and they want to always maintain being like a sustaining business. And so they're not just going to continuously pump money. At some point we have to recoup sales from some of our players, and this past summer was disappointing in that regard. I also wonder about bringing in a striker in January. Doesn't really, unless you're selling Nketiah, I'm trying to figure out where the space is going to come from. I know it's like, well, forget Nketiah, who cares? But it doesn't really work that way. Nketiah is on £100,000 per week. And so I think you have to have an exit plan for Nketiah. And the way that Arteta loves him, that is definitely something that I think, I love that Arteta has players that he really puts his arm around and really believes in. But I think his personal feelings around players get in the way of Arsenal making the right decisions, that move us forward. I don't think Eddie is improving us. I don't think he's taking us to the next level, but he's on a contract that is going to be unattractive to take on for teams that are probably more on his level. And so I'm not sure when we're going to move Nketiah on. I'm not sure if, I know there's a market for him, but at £100,000 per week, I'm not sure. And then, you need to make room for another striker to come in that's probably going to want to be on high wages as well. So, yeah, it's a tough one. I'm disappointed by that, but at the same time, like, this is just the situation that Arsenal are always in. Yeah. Let's see. Ashley says, rather ESR makes mistakes than Havertz, because those mistakes are free. You can't answer for Havertz mistakes. Yo-Yo says, DCL, Abraham, Toney, you Gunners love English center forwards. But I think, is Toney not superior to those two, though? I think DCL was always kind of looked at as somebody that could maybe backfill a position more than anything, not by me, but by others. And Abraham never really came off like somebody that would be like the main guy. I think Toney does give off main guy energy. So, and he has the stats and, that kind of stuff to back it up. So, I don't have an issue with English, center forwards, as long as they're good enough. John says, just that Chelsea owner is like a fat kid in a sweet shop. I want. Exactly. Joe says, Toney wants Arsenal, and in January, he'll see Chelsea near the bottom of the table and Arsenal at the top. The one thing about Chelsea that I think puts them in a good position with a lot of players is that they just assume that they'll get to the point. Like, people are just always like, even the media, the assumption is that at some point Chelsea will get it right, because they're spending money, and spending money for Chelsea is always kind of like reaped rewards for them. So as long as they're spending money on expensive players, that eventually it'll all click, all come together, and they'll be fine. Now, in a couple of years, if that doesn't end up being the truth, then I think people will change their opinion. But just in the short aftermath after, a couple seasons ago winning the Champions League, and, even though they, haven't been great in the last like maybe one or two seasons, the perception of Chelsea is they'll get it right at some point because they will continue to spend, and players will continue to go to them because they'll pay a little bit more in wages. And the players also have probably grown up in an era seeing Chelsea eventually get it right, despite having like made bad decisions. As long as they're spending money, at some point it'll all come together and they'll win something. And so, and Arsenal don't have that reputation at the moment, by the way. So, I don't think necessarily that, I mean, Tony may have an affinity towards Arsenal, but, if Chelsea come to you and they're saying, well, we're going to pay you 3 times as much as, Brentford are going to pay you, and we're just going to keep spending money until we get it right, you'll probably go there. Like, let's keep it real. So yeah. ZFB says, Toney for Nketiah. What are you smoking there? Send some through. Philip says, Toney, I like Arsenal. Boley says, overpay for him now. Yeah, it seems like anybody that wants to come to Arsenal, likes Arsenal, anything, they immediately go after them. And I think it's okay. Like, the thing is that Arsenal have to have a plan for somebody else. I think there are multiple solutions to the problem that we have at center forward. If you view it as a problem, I know some people don't view it as a problem at the moment, but there's always like multiple ways to solve your problem. Toney is not the only striker that we can go after. He's not the best. He's not even like the best, talent wise that we could look at in the next, 6 months or so. But it's, I think, one of the more attainable options, if that makes sense. And so some people may be looking like, great, I never wanted Toney. Let's go after an Evan Ferguson. Remember, we talked about this yesterday. Let's go after an Evan Ferguson. Let's go after Osimhen. But I still feel like attainability is going to be super important for Arsenal, again, because we don't particularly sell well. I don't anticipate the Kroenkes continuously funding this project without Arsenal actually recouping some money back. And so, yeah, it's one attainable option, probably going to end up being off the table, but it doesn't mean that there's not more talent out there. We know there's more talent out there. So that's fine. Let's see. Clement says, we need to hijack Chelsea's bid for Ivan Toney in January, and we have options just in case we don't get Toney in January, Vlahovic, Sesko, etc. So it's not like alarm, like sound the alarm. Like, it's not so funny. Maybe not to you guys because you guys weren't there, but in our group chat, like somebody had reposted that DiMarzio tweet about like Man City being close to sealing the agreement with Declan Rice. I cannot explain to you guys how that moment felt for me. Like, that was the one signing, if we got it done, I'd probably be okay. And just the feeling of like we lost him was like, oh my gosh, like, no, Toney is not like that. Like, Toney is not like losing Declan Rice or losing or getting hijacked by Man City for Declan Rice. Like, it will never feel like that. There's more options out there that suit Arsenal's needs, but it's an attainable option that could potentially be off the table. Boy said, Toney is going to get in trouble with the London nightlife. We don't need or want this player. Kubo is infinitely better purchase. Well, they don't play the same position, so I don't know if Kubo and Toney necessarily need to be compared as better options or anything like that. But the first 2 sentences of Toney will get in trouble, I mean, some people will assume that, and some people just won't want him because of the trouble that he's been in. I tend to think people deserve a second chance. So, and he probably is, hopefully he's learned his lesson, blah, 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 but again, I'm definitely not like, it's not the end of the world if we don't get Toney. It's just another option off the table. Yo-Yo says CF isn't a dire problem, but like Xhaka's place last season will need to be addressed sooner rather than later. That's probably the best way to, in terms of priority and urgency. Some people feel like if we don't get a center forward, that is it. And I have a hard time connecting with that thought process because Arsenal last season scored tons of goals without a traditional number 9. I think a lot of it has to do with, because I thought at the end of the window, some of the fan base just wanted to buy players because other teams were buying players. They were seeing other teams start to work throughout the transfer window. Mind you, we had done so much work at the beginning. They were watching us do business while they did nothing. And then we had to kind of spend the back end of this transfer window. And then it was like, are we doing enough? Are we doing enough? Well, we've done a lot of our stuff. So, but I do feel like we have this like, well, they're doing it. So why aren't we doing it? And because like every other top six team has kind of moved back over to traditional number nines, it's we will not prosper if we do not get this number nine. And I think we need to focus on ourselves a little bit more. Arsenal, as long as Arsenal's way of play produces high quality chances and our players are putting those chances away, we're fine. We can reevaluate maybe halfway through the season and kind of be able to see with a larger, set of data, like if we're actually hitting those numbers the way that we were last season. But I think this whole like, if we don't get a center forward, we're finished is kind of like, I just want a center forward because I just want one because everybody else is getting one. There are tons of options out there. It's not like we missed out on Holland. It's not like there's nobody else out there that would suit our needs. Like it's not the end of the world, but some people do view it as such. And I wonder, like, I'm trying to figure out if Arsenal scored as many goals as they did last season, what makes you think that center forward is such a dire need? I think midfield is still something that I'm looking at that I would like to see something else happening there. I'm unsatisfied with our midfield rebuild, if I'm honest with you. I think that's everything happens through midfield. So if the midfield isn't right, then, but there you go. Aha says, Jess, do we even have a natural number 8 or someone who can be that player other than Rice? Someone not overly attacking like a true CM. I don't think we do. Vieira, ESR, more attacking mids. I don't know if it has to be by design that Arsenal don't want a traditional number 8. It has to be by design because we have went through multiple windows and have yet to recruit a number 8. Now, you could say probably the number 8 that we did recruit, we misprofiled them as a 6, and that was Sambi. Sambi is a number 8. Like, he is a number 8. He is more box to box or maybe like a deep line playmaker in a double pivot, but he didn't work out for us. And then we've since like bought Vieira and Kai Havertz, neither of whom are number 8s. We moved Xhaka on, and we bought Declan Rice, who's more of a 6. We bought in Jorginho, who is definitely more of a 6. And we've converted Thomas Partey as an 8 into a 6. So I'm really, it has to be by design that in the couple of windows that we've had under Mikel Arteta, that we have yet to get in a true center midfielder, and have opted for forwards and number 10s in that position and stock of number 6s. So we even like converted Xhaka into an attacking midfielder, a second forward, so I think it's by design. It has to be, or we're just not doing anything right. Add Adeg Boyega says, trust me on this. Brentford will not sell Toney to Chelsea, even if they paid the right figure. Have learnt from signing of Raya. Tottenham brought the right figure and they chose to loan him to us. Maybe. I don't know. I could definitely see him going there if I'm honest with you. And so yeah, Toney, like, obviously is somebody that's on the list and a lot of Arsenal fans would like, but could very well end up at Chelsea. If he's going to, it'll happen very quickly. They will sew it up and it will know very soon whether, where he's going to go. So yeah. Philip says, according to TDK, Havertz has better defensive numbers than Xhaka so far. I don't, it's like, I understand that, like, he wins his duels, but do I actually think that, if Decore or Idrissa Gueye or Onana hit Kai Havertz, he's not going to go tumbling just like Fabio Vieira? No. I think it's the same. And I love the different knock, by the way. It's a very good channel. So yeah, there you go. There's 227 of you guys in here. Make sure you guys like the video and subscribe to the channel. Arsblog has said that Odegaard's new deal is imminent, which is music to my ears. My favorite player, personally. And it's a player that there's a lot of debate around Odegaard and what kind of player he is. We'll talk about that and where he should be playing for Arsenal. those are things that we're going to get into. But at the bare minimum, like, we need to get him on a new deal. He's a fantastic player. We saw over the summer that like PSG were looking at him. Other teams will start to look at him as well, because he has just blossomed into the player that I think a lot of people thought he was when at 16 he went to Real Madrid. His story is fantastic. He's the type of captain that I think a lot of people don't, are not too fond of, because they want to see a yelly, shouty guy. But Odegaard, every single game, whether he's personally playing well or not, leads the team like a captain should. And that is so important. I don't think this season he's even locked into his best. Like, when you're watching Odegaard, when you're watching like a fantastic Odegaard game. But the thing that I'm starting to really like about Saka, Odegaard, and Martinelli in particular is even their bad games, they have moments where what we would consider their bad games. They have moments where they change the game for the team, whether that's a goal or an assist or just making something happen. And they're always reliable defensively. They never shirk their defensive duties. They're always there for the team. And I think a lot of that is driven by Martin Odegaard, because he does it every single game, even if he's not having his best game, which is so important. He doesn't sulk. He doesn't whine. He doesn't do any of that stuff. He's so mature, and I love that. So basically, Arseblog was talking about how he's been kind of coy about the new deal, but we know it's coming. And Odegaard's current deal runs into 2025, so it expires in 2 years, and an extension is likely to run to 2027 with the option to extend for a further year, which I kind of think is like the same. It's the same as Martinelli. Martinelli obviously got his a while ago, but his runs until 2027, I think, with an option to extend as well. And so that gives you about 4 years, to make sure that you win shit so you don't lose Odegaard, But he seems very settled at Arsenal, very committed to what we're doing here, which is important. But, something that, me and some of my friends were talking about was, what does commitment from a player look like to you guys? Because, I think we've given Edu like a lot of praise, rightful praise around, getting players on new deals. But there was I think, a little bit of disappointment in the length of contract that we were able to get for Saka and Saliba in particular. And with Saka's being 4 years straight up, no option to extend. Saliba's does have an option to extend 1 year. And, I'm looking at players like Declan Rice, who's older, that has committed to 5 years plus 1. Odegaard is going to, be like 4 years plus 1. Martinelli said, put the contract in front of me and I'll sign whatever. And, I've been thinking about this quite a bit, because I'm like, I think we take for granted some of the players that are not necessarily from Haaland, that are completely committed to what we're doing and are signing contracts and are doing things that really show that they really rate what we're doing, and they really believe in the vision. And then there's other players like Bukayo, who I'm really not trying to shit on, but signed a 4-year deal straight and also wanted a release clause. And whether that shows commitment or not to what we're actually doing. Because in 2 years, we're going to have to try to renegotiate with Bukayo. And I do think that there's, maybe a fear that he may feel like he could go and do other things with another club. Who knows? But seeing players like Declan and Odegaard in particular, who are 24 and could probably go anywhere, commit long-term to Arsenal not being Haaland, I think they deserve some credit as well for the commitment, because they could do that anywhere. But it's interesting, like how we view commitment, and how some players are put on a pedestal despite what I view as commitment is signing your fucking life away to us. But maybe you have other plans. So yeah, allegedly. Yo-Yo says players have to protect their interests. Club has to protect their interests. I take nothing personally. Nico says if we don't win anything in the next 2 years, Saliba and Saka are gone. At least Saliba has the option to extend. Says Saka is assessing his options, and Saliba, those are your world-class players who want to see first how the club is moving. There's nothing wrong with that either. Like, I don't really blame them. Like, I always think about it from a player's perspective, and then from put my Arsenal hat on. And when I take my Arsenal hat off, I do think as a player, it's a short career. So you have to make sure that you are in a position to have control over when and where you go. So that's fine. When I put my Arsenal hat back on, I do think that like commitment is important, and it makes me think differently about certain players than it does others. And I've seen top players sign long-term deals at some of our rivals despite them not doing very well, but they stayed because that's where they wanted to be. And I want to see that commitment too sometimes, but you can't always get that. You can't always get that, so it's fair. Nico says Ornstein said Saliba doesn't have an option to extend. He said that, but I've read from somebody else who's really connected and usually knows their stuff that he does. A lot of times Ornstein says that they don't have them, but they do. So maybe Saka does, but I don't think he does. Robert says, I love you, Jess. Thank you. And what you do, keep up the great work. Keep up the great job. That said, I think Havertz, if given the opportunity to bet into the team, will do well. There's something Arteta sees in him. Fair enough. Nico says, if we don't win anything in the next 2 years, I read that as well. And let's see. Clement says, if we want to keep Saka, Saliba, Martinelli, etc. for the long term, the club has to start winning trophies. End of. Fair enough. Fair enough. And that's the thing. It's like we have some top quality players. I don't think any of them they're world class to us, but to the outside world, maybe they're not world class. Fair. I don't give a shit. But players like Saliba and Saka and Odegaard, I think in particular, are the types of players that could go to the very top of the game. And so, we have to start winning big trophies. And I think we do have about 2 years to really start showing that we can do that. And that really starts with, I think putting a good foot forward Champions League wise. We just need to be really serious. I think it could be potentially damaging that we didn't win the Premier League when we had the chance, because as much as people were like, oh, well, things happen and, it didn't really bottle it, young team, blah, blah, blah. Saka could play for anybody. Saliba could play for anybody. Odegaard could play for anybody. And they could go to teams that, would probably win the Champions League at some point, despite being young players. So, I see both sides. I really, really do. It does kind of hurt a little bit knowing that you have players that are maybe looking to have easy routes out if that were need be, like, or something that they wanted to do. But I have to respect the fact that like they are top players, so they're not just going to stick around for nothing. So there you go. There you go. I get that part. So yeah. Let's see. Clement says minimal for this club in the Champions League round of 16 for me this season in the Champions League quarterfinals. I have quarterfinals marked down as like the bare minimum, and I think there is going to be a rude awakening for the fan base. I see some people saying things like we're definitely getting to the final. I don't understand the math that people are getting to by saying like, oh yeah, well, if City is the best team and they won the Champions League and we came second to them, then that means that we're the second best team in the Champions League. It doesn't work like that. We have like almost no experience in the Champions League from the players that really matter in our team. People will say, well, Jorginho and Kai Havertz, they won it before. That doesn't fucking matter. There are teams that play in this competition year in, year out. So they have players that have 3, 4, 5 years of experience of playing it year in, year out. We have players that are our main guys that have never stepped foot on a Champions League pitch. So in Sevilla, that's not going to be an easy game. PSV, that's not going to be an easy game. And so, like, I need people to like adjust, but also I'm caveating that with the fact that I still feel like our team is good enough to at least get to the quarters. But the idea that like we're just gonna walk the competition because we came second to Man City, y'all, y'all, you're in for a rude awakening. Emmanuel says, but the players who are worried about the club ambitions also have a role to play in us winning trophies. I hate the idea of us having them in a favor to them. And like, that is another part of the conversation that I don't think is always spoken about is so when it came down to us winning the Premier League, what did you do to make sure that that happened? And even though we can blame Mikel Arteta for playing Rob Holding is not the reason why Saka missed that penalty. Rob Holding is not the reason why, Ramsdale chucked it into his own net against Southampton. So I hear that aspect of things as well. And so I do think that like I don't think this team is set up to fail. I think in the past we had teams that, lacked quality beyond 2 or 3 players. We had obvious like profiles missing under Arsene, where you saw RVP and Cesc and Nasri, and they were like the best players in the team, and we had obvious like problems at the back. We never bought a CDM, so you could see why they were like, you're not taking it serious. But when I look at the team that we have right now and the depth that we have in the squad, it may not be perfect, but there's no way you can say that this team is incapable of winning anything. And so the players also have to take responsibility for getting into those moments and not taking advantage of them, not rising to the occasion. And, I do think that like that is a part of the conversation as well. What did you do to make sure that we won? And I think some players have to look themselves in the mirror. Yo-Yo says 20 years at the end of the season of having not won the title. We are the big club due to history. Players would be foolish to tie their futures to a club trying to reinstate their position among the elite. Fair enough. Damien says the people that know football make us 4th fave to win the Champions League. I'm willing to bet that we win the group easily. Football's not played on paper. That's just my feeling on that. I think we were pretty poor in Europa League every time we played in it. We struggled. We weren't really, wiping teams away the way that we probably should have. Now we were rotating, but like still like the quality that we have in our teams, like, so I think in Europe, there's definitely something there. And yeah, so I'm not about to be believing people saying that we're 4th likely. Like, no, I think there's heavy emphasis as well on the Premier League and like the world, like, or the football world as a whole really there's a heavy weight on the Premier League. So if you're a good Premier League team, they will most likely rank you as a better team, more likely to win than a team like in Portugal, a team in France, whatever. I think that's another reason why like Saka and Odegaard were, shoo-ins for being, nominated for the Ballon d'Or is because they weighed fighting for the Premier League very heavily versus winning the Carabao Cup, which if you look at Rashford's numbers, they were up there and probably higher than Saka's, but they didn't give a shit about Carabao Cup. They cared about like the Premier League. And so we're always going to be favored because we're in the Premier League and people think it's the best league in the world, which it is. But that doesn't take into account all the nuances about Arsenal not having any experience in the competition, having a very new manager, and the fact that it's just not that easy, So I don't think it's something that we should take lightly the way that I think some people are. But his deal, Odegaard, is Odegaard's new deal is imminent. So here's the thing, Nico. I see you're putting this out here like Jess is believing what she wants and not tier 1 journals that are saying, I rate it, but I hope you're right about Saliba's extension. Ornstein said without a shadow of a doubt that we were not interested in selling Smith Rowe. That's what he said at the beginning of the window. But as the window went on and Emile Smith Rowe, like at the very end, there was conversations around his playing time, the narrative changed. It changed from, well, we won't sell him to Chelsea, but if a bid over a certain amount came in, it would be considered. And that was coming from tier one journalists. That was not Ornstein, but it was coming from tier one journalists. And so I get what you're saying, but like, I wouldn't be saying it if it didn't come from somebody who's reliable. He has a year, he has an extension. It's just like Ornstein gets certain figures for, deals and stuff like that aren't always exactly accurate. He puts out what he's been told. And so sometimes Fabrizio Romano and Ornstein have different figures on contract extensions and deals, the money factors of things. And so Ornstein is usually right about everything, but the information around Saliba having a 1-year extension or a 1-year option to like extend is coming from somebody reliable as well. And so he may have one in there. And so even if he doesn't, let's say it's 4 years and it's straight, Saliba is not Hale End. So the conversation was more about Bukayo Saka, who is Hale End, the face of the club, who basically it was, I want a release clause or you're getting 4 years. So it doesn't really change the conversation very much. But Odegaard's new deal is imminent, which is amazing. And so I love him and I'm glad he's going to be staying a lot longer. There's 225 of you guys in here. Make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel. Let's talk about Arsenal players on international duty. Obviously, it's not the most fun, but remember the times where Arsenal didn't have any players on international duty, maybe like 3 or 4? And so we have definitely graduated from that time, and we had 16 players out there on international duty, which is a very prideful or like a time of like immense pride where you're watching players that have grown up at the club or grown up over the last 2 or 3 seasons and have established themselves in their national teams. It's also a time for like total anxiety because you don't want guys to get injured, and so I'm glad that it's coming to an end, right? But let's talk about some of the players that were on international duty. The first player, obviously, that I think we have to talk about is Martinelli, who is a game changer for Brazil last night in their 1-0 win against Peru. Watched the game from start to finish. Brazil were abysmal. Abysmal. If Peru could do anything on the other end, they would have been in trouble. But it was a relatively easy day defensively for Gabriel, Marquinhos, Danilo, and Renan Lodi. That was their back four plus Ederson. And so they didn't really have much to deal with. But when I tell you that they were stinking the place out, everybody was over dribbling. They looked confused and everything was so complicated. And I know that they have a new coach and everything like that, but they looked like they had never played with each other before. And it was a hard watch. Casemiro, my God, nightmare. He had 1 or 2 really nice passes here and there, but his legs are gone. His legs are gone. Bruno Guimaraes, great player, so rash, so just like totally out of his element, not really playing on the level that we know him to play at. Neymar, on the ground every 10 seconds. Rodrigo, non-factor. Richarlison scored a goal, but it was offside. The guy can't catch a break. It is what it is. And then Rafinha was like, okay. And, they brought on Gabriel Jesus for Richarlison with about 20 minutes to go. And he didn't really make that big of an impact. But I'll tell you this, like, if you're watching it, they weren't even able to get the ball to the forwards. They were struggling so much in midfield to just connect simple passes. I could not tell you how many times Casemiro, Bruno Guimaraes, and Neymar gave the ball away. Just under no pressure, just gave the ball away. So they brought in Martinelli in the last 10 minutes of the game, and I retweeted the 10-minute cameo. But for people that are always saying that Martinelli doesn't move them or, he's a dog and he just runs with his head down, it doesn't fucking matter because the guy makes the game tick along. Like, he pushes you forward. He's so intense in everything that he does. And he just makes things happen and he pops off the screen. I don't care if he's not out there doing fucking Rabonas. I do not care. The boy is so, so good. He comes out there and he makes the difference that eventually gets Brazil the goal. He put in one really nice cross to Gabriel Jesus. Gabriel Jesus just barely missed it. Oh, sorry, my TV turned off. Just barely missed it. It was a great cross. And then he came down the left-hand side, took on a couple of the Peruvian defenders, won the corner that eventually became a goal for Marquinhos from that corner. And I just think Martinelli deserves more credit. It's really weird how he's just put on this level of these overrated crap players. He's always the first player that people are saying we need to replace or, needs to be, upgraded upon. And I just think he really suffers again from not playing for one of the more popular Brazilian teams as he grew up. And he came from the fourth tier and he went to Arsenal, and, Arsenal were not great at the time that he came to Arsenal, but what a pickup. The guy is so good, and he really made the difference. And it's good to make a good impression on the new coach. I mean, eventually the coach will be Ancelotti, so this guy's not going to be here for very long. But I think it's important for Martinelli and Gabriel Magalhaes to kind of establish themselves in the team now so that they continue to get chosen. Gabriel was great in the game once again. He had two really good showings. He didn't finish the first game against Bolivia, but he finished this game with 90 minutes. He was very good, very solid, decent on the ball. But Martinelli is a player that Brazil need. Sometimes they just make things too complicated. Like they don't have enough flair to be doing all these flicks and shit. They just need to play football. And he was just direct, intense with everything that he was doing and made the difference. And it was great. I love Martinelli and the way that he plays. And you need players like that. You need a balance. And I think that's why Saka and Martinelli work so well, because like Gabriel and Saliba, they complement each other very, very well. And you need that sometimes. And I think some of the players on Brazil, they all want to kind of do the same things, and you need something a little bit different. So yeah, Ivy says, really, are people actually on Martinelli's case? I can't believe it. Martinelli's always kind of on there's always somebody better. You're always looking at somebody who has one good game or a couple of decent games, and it's like, oh, we need that player. And I just don't think Martinelli gets enough credit, despite, how successful he's been at Arsenal, where nobody thought he would be, because he just was he was an unknown quantity. Nobody really, except for, I'm sure, people that are scouts knew about him. But, if Martinelli went to Real Madrid or Martinelli went to another team, we would be desperate to have him in our team. John Donut says, I want Martinelli to gain more popularity, but I feel him being underrated is good for him right now. He can grow without that pressure. Fair enough. I like that. Yo-Yo says Martinelli is class. However, he still needs refinement. It will come. And once that happens, he will become world class. And the one thing about Martinelli that I don't want so much of his rawness to be coached out of him. I think his best qualities come with him being a little bit unpredictable, a little bit rough around the edges. I don't think I want him to be as clean as Saka. But I do understand kind of what you're meaning about maybe just, I think decision-making, when he's at his best, the decisions that he makes are perfect. When to go to the byline, when to cut in on his right, when to shoot, when to cross, when to pass, when to do this. Right now, the decision-making is not perfect, but that kind of comes with having so many different people around you all the time. But I agree with you. Martinelli is total class, and he being in Champions League, I do think is going to give him a different platform. Now, that might not work to our advantage, because the last thing we want is for people to be watching Martinelli and say, actually, he'd be great in our team. But respect him and, love on him while he's here. He has such a high ceiling, and I hope he stays at Arsenal forever, but he's definitely somebody I can see playing at the highest level. You don't have to be clean and perfect. Sometimes the chaos of a player is what really makes them special. Social Join says they miss Vinny and Paquetá. They miss both of them badly. It was a rough night for Brazil. I have to be honest. It was a hard watch. Faya says Martinelli is one of the best left wingers we got. It's like we try our best to get rid of our best players. Shake my head. Some people need to just be quiet. And I don't mind wanting competition or wanting to have multiple players, but it just feels like there's always like a question mark around whether or not Martinelli's good enough for something. And I'm just like, I don't know what you guys are watching. The guy is good enough. Sometimes he can do too much, or like we said, his decision making is not always the best, but he's 21. Like, it's fine. Blaze says, just don't take seriously people's opinion on Twitter football. Some people are stupid and don't understand football. It's not just on Twitter, it's on YouTube, it's everywhere. But I hear what you're saying. Yo-Yo says Martinelli is the only reason why he hasn't scored yet this season. Under a different manager, he will be a 9 again. Fair enough. I know some people still view him as a striker. I think he's just a forward, and he could play through the center, but we would have to change the way that we play, and we're not very flexible at the moment. Philip says Rashford's 17 goals, 5 assists versus Martinelli's 5 goals, 15 goals and 5 assists last season, yet Martinelli offers way more on the ball than Rashford, terrorizing defenders all game, yet Rashford spoke as superior. Unbelievable, really. The thing about Rashford is I also think he needs to be put in a category with people that are his age. He's constantly being compared to Saka and Martinelli. But he needs to be compared to people in his age range. He needs to be, looked at with Mbappe and guys like that. Martinelli and Saka are not your age mates, and I think they like to put him in there because it's like it's a comfortable, like where he performs at the same level, if not just marginally better than them sometimes. But Marcus Rashford is like 26. Like he should be well ahead of these guys. If they're having similar numbers, that's more about Marcus than anybody else. But I agree with you about the roundness of Martinelli's game. He offers you so much. He offers you, hard work on and off the ball. He's good at progressing it. He's good at, his passing has actually gotten a lot better. When his decision making is on point, he's so good. His crossing is actually very good, and he's creatively, he's actually gotten a lot better. Like Martinelli is a very good player. Boy says Martinelli is one of the best left wingers in Europe now. That pirouette pass he did to Nketiah is still the maddest clip of the season so far. And he did it on purpose. He does it all the time. Like, I don't know why people are like, he didn't do it on purpose. He does it all the time. It's like his signature thing. So yeah, I love Martinelli. I really do. And it was nice to see him show out and look really good, in a very short period of time. Other players on, international duty, Trossard scored a goal, a really nice goal. He wasn't playing in midfield this time. He was playing off a left wing, but he scored a nice goal. Trossard, he always comes up with the goods. Odegaard also scored a goal against Georgia, a really nice one-touch finish from the left-hand side. Everybody was highlighting that. And it came from across from Nusa, the winger, Norway's new winger, who everybody's obsessed with. We always have a new thing to be obsessed over, a new young player that we need to be obsessed with. I'm not buying stocks just yet. But Odegaard against Georgia, 90 minutes played, 106 touches, 65 passes, 10 duels won, 9 long balls with 100% accuracy, 7 shots in one game, 6 recoveries, 4 passes into the final third, 4 successful dribbles completed, 4 tackles won, 2 fouls won, 1 goal and 1 interception. I mean, again, another player whose all-around game has become so much better. When he came to Arsenal, he was kind of more of a nailed-on number 10, but he has really made his game so much fuller with his ability to recover and press. And, he never shirks his defensive duty. Sometimes he wins duels, sometimes he doesn't, but he is definitely an 8 now. He's not just somebody that just sits behind the strikers and just picks passes. He's so much more than that. And I think the way that people always compare Odegaard with Bruno Fernandes and Madison, it just shows to me that people don't actually watch Odegaard play. He is the pass before the pass. He is a tempo setter. He's a midfielder. Like, he just controls the match, and he does have creativity about him. And you'll look at some of his older games and say, yeah, he was doing a lot of that, but he's actually playing deeper and getting more involved in the second phase. And I love that about him because he can kind of do so much. And he's unlocked goals, which is more important than anything. For a team that doesn't have like a traditional number 9, having somebody in the team that comes up reliably with goals from midfield is so important. So I'm actually so happy that he's gotten to the point where he's shooting a lot more. He's being more selfish. I know some people are like, he needs to pass more, but actually like that Saka and Martin Odegaard have gotten more selfish because they should be. They need to be scoring more goals. And Odegaard, I think his first goal in Euro qualifying, and people were like, oh my gosh, he hasn't scored any goals. Well, now he scored one, so shut up. But Odegaard is a fantastic player, and I'm so glad that he's ours. Like, it's insane. But he had a really, really good showing against Georgia, which I think was really good for him. Also, Kai Havertz, Germany played against France. Germany won 2-1. It's amazing what sacking a manager will do. You can just tell some players were trying to get that man fired. I mean, you could tell against Japan when Rudiger did not run back for one of those transitions, that they just wanted him sacked. They knew that all he had to do was lose against Japan and he was gone. And they played much better and looked they didn't look like old Germany. Like, I'm not going to give them that much credit, but they definitely had more energy and more about them. Saliba struggled in the game. I'll be honest. Like, I call a spade a spade. I'm not going to lie to you guys. I thought Saliba struggled, but it's unfamiliar settings with France playing next to Todibo, a player that I'm not sure that Saliba's ever really played with. If he has, it's been minimal time. And the whole France team was a little bit of a mismatch of like subs, people that don't usually play, and then some starters, but they didn't look good as a whole. And I think Saliba did not have his best game. They, gave up the 2 goals or whatever. I don't think either one of them were his fault per se, but he was a little shaky on the ball. You could just tell like he was in unfamiliar settings. So wasn't his greatest game, but who cares because he's ours and we know he's great, right? He's going to be fine. Kai Havertz, I think people are making a lot of his, his like 20-minute cameo. But the good thing was that he got himself like in, physical situations where he was trying to win the ball, a couple slide tackles, working hard for the team, which is important. I think Kai Havertz has to work hard for the team. If he's going to play for Arsenal, like, he has to have that every single game. It should not be something that we're celebrating. It should be something that is a prerequisite for being at Arsenal. So seeing him do that was like cool. Like I said, he didn't start the game, but he did have a nice assist for Sane for their second goal. And what was interesting about it, it was in the right half space, which if you watch Kai Havertz at Bayer Leverkusen, he usually played on the right-hand side. He played, kind of where Odegaard plays. So we have a player that's left-footed that also likes to operate in that right half space. And so everybody saw that goal and kind of decided that, we need new positions for Kai Havertz and Martin Odegaard, because this has been an idea that's been in the making for a long time. When George used to come on the show, he used to always talk about Emile Smith-Rowe needs to play on the right and Odegaard either need to be benched, or, this was always the master plan that Emile Smith-Rowe would play on the right and Odegaard would fall to the bench or play on the left, because you have to have, an overlapping player on that side to support Bukayo Saka in that position, especially if you're going to invert on the right-hand side, which I do think with Timber, that probably was what we were going to do. If I'm honest, I don't know if it was always meant for him to play on the left, but I do think that Timber might have inverted from the right. And so if you invert from the right, you have to have an overlap. So you lose Ben White's overlap. So essentially you have to give the overlap from the midfielder. I understand. I get what you guys are trying to say. whatever. But that's kind of the problem with buying a player like Kai Havertz is now we're trying to figure out a place to put him that's a different place from where we bought him for. Um, he was supposed to be the player that came in and came in for Xhaka. Now we're trying to figure out a place where he plays best, and where he supposedly would play best would be where Odegaard plays. And now Odegaard, because he had a goal from that side on the left-hand side, all of a sudden his better position would be off of the left. But most of the game when he played for Norway, he was on the same side that he always is on for Arsenal. So it's a tough one. Arsenal having every single one of their midfielders be left-footed for me is a little bit like, what are we doing? We don't have like any right foot. Actually, Emile Smith-Rowe is like the only midfielder that's right-footed. But I'm not sure if I 100% buy into this theory that we need to switch Martin Odegaard and Kai Havertz. If we want to get the best out of Kai Havertz, we have to find his best position. But I also don't feel like that means we need to move Martin Odegaard out of his best position and disrupt everything is already disrupted as it is. We saw just having Thomas Partey on the other side inverting really threw off the balance. So putting Kai Havertz on the same side as Saka and disrupting the right-hand side, that's pretty much the only thing that's working at the moment. Feels to me like a little bit of like we're trying to find somewhere for him to be, where we should have recruited somebody that naturally fits in that left center mid position. And so Odegaard can stay on his position in his spot. So it's a tough one. I think a lot of people feel like it makes sense on paper, but one, I don't see it happening. And two, we have really benefited and ate very well with that right-hand side ticking the way that it does. Could it be better? Maybe, but I'm not sure that making it better means putting Kai Havertz there just because he made one nice pass into Sane in an international game friendly. Feels a little bit of a stretch, but it also feels like something that has been sometimes you work backward from what you want to happen. If you've always kind of wanted Emile Smith-Rowe to play on the right and you wanted Odegaard out the team on the left, then seeing Kai Havertz make that pass is confirmation bias of something that you always wanted to happen, where Odegaard has not been a problem on that right-hand side. I really push back on the idea that like Odegaard is a problem on the right-hand side and he's holding Saka back. Because I've also heard that Odegaard is holding Bukayo Saka back, and I feel like that is off for me. So, Faya says we need to stop changing our team to suit Havertz. It's not working out for us. He should be on the bench. Mr. says we need two of the most technical players. Our two most technical players are Odie and Zinni. They need to be on the other side of each other. Can't be this close. And that's the thing. It's like, obviously, Zinni also played midfield for Ukraine. I would love to see him just naturally in the midfield position, but I understand that he basically plays in midfield anyway. But essentially what you have is like Rice, he kind of he stays central, but then when we're in possession and we get closer to the box, he facilitates on the right and the left-hand side and tries to find those little triangles, but Zinchenko basically plays left center mid and Odegaard plays right center mid. And then Kai Havertz kind of just like does his thing all across the front line and offers like another attacker. It works the way that it does, but moving Odegaard to the other side to facilitate Kai Havertz, why didn't we just get somebody who can play left center mid? It's just kind of like feels like a backwards way of doing things. Colin says, I cannot stand the goalpost changing. Rice was the Xhaka replacement. Havertz is the manager's sword that is diving our team sheet into pieces. Blaze says Arsenal fans need to accept that Havertz will start against Everton and Arteta will never bench him. Philip says Odegaard would have made that Havertz assist every single time. 2, I believe Arteta wants Havertz turning up at the back post for Saka crosses. Can't do that from the right. And I just seeing Odegaard score one goal off of the left side and seeing Havertz make one pass on the right-hand side does not mean we need to shift all of our dynamics and switch them because it's an idea that we've had for a long time. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me to do that. And I just don't understand it. Like, I understand the thought process, and like I can galaxy brain my way into all types of tactics, but ultimately the right hand side is working the way that it always has. Odegaard, Ben White offers the overlap for Saka. It all works. The combinations work, and there's no reason to change it around. And quite frankly, I think we need to, if either you need to either bench Kai Havertz or stick with it until it eventually potentially works. Moving him to the other side right now just feels a little much. Tell me this, I'll tell you this, says Reyes, Zinchenko, Gabriel, Saliba, White, Rice, Trossard, Odegaard, Martinelli, Saka, and Nketiah with Jorginho, Tomiyasu, Smith Rowe, Vieira, and Havertz to come on. Yeah, I would be very surprised if Trossard started. I'll be really honest with you. And Jesus has to start against Everton. Unlocking a low block is just it's so much more difficult without him. So I think Jesus has to start. But I hear you. Blaze says Jess, who said Odegaard is holding back Saka. Some Arsenal fans like to tell something really like I've heard all of these things before because I know people that really have always wanted Emile Smith Rowe on the right hand side. And they have an idea that him being there makes more sense than Odegaard because Odegaard doesn't provide an overlap, and they feel like he's getting in Saka's way, hence holding him back. And even like, with England, Saka looks different because, he has an overlap most of the time from like Kyle Walker or Reece James or somebody like that. So he does look different and he has more help. But at Arsenal, like it's just the way that we play and it works. And Saka's putting up his best ever numbers and people are acting like Odegaard is holding him back. Like there's just no way. Like, and I would be interested in seeing Kai Havertz on the right-hand side, but that is in a game where we're playing against very low level opposition and like Odegaard is getting a rest, not instead of Odegaard and moving him to the other side. Havertz has played his best games in midfield on the right-hand side. So I understand what people are saying, but why did we recruit somebody who can only play on the same side as Odegaard when we needed somebody on the left? He needs to either work on the left or he needs to eat bench. Like that's just what it is. Pez says Kai and Odie will interchange with each other mid-game when our game model is optimized. Right now, they're still learning. And maybe that's a part of it that will come at the next stage, like you're saying, maybe those swap positions. That's something to think about for the future. But I'm not moving Odegaard from that side. Okay. Social Join says we are not interested in Havertz talk. The only convo we want to hear about Havertz is that he's left the club. Sorry, Jess, it is what it is. Fair enough. Yeah, I hear you. Tawana says Vieira and ESR is in a balanced midfield with Odegaard and or Partey or Rice. These fans have no sense. They might not like Kai, but it's more balanced. And no, I definitely hear that. And like I do kind of think that Vieira and Odegaard do make a lot of sense though. The reason why is because they're not the same and they don't offer the same things. Like I said, Odegaard is more of the pass before the pass, something that people were, I think, weirdly alarmed by when he played against Georgia is that he had no key passes. Let me just pull it up on my phone because I saved it. You guys know I love Odegaard. Yeah, Odegaard had 33 of 37 accurate passes. He had 7 long balls and he had 0 key passes. And if you look at, I want to say I have it up. Let me see if I have it. This that we looked at the other day was that, let me pull this down too, is that Odegaard is like way down there for expected assists and key passes per 90. He's below Kai Havertz and below Ben White, below Nketiah. And so people are like freaking out saying Odegaard is not creative, but his role in the team is so much more different than it was when we were heavily reliant on him to be our only creative player, and I think what Fabio Vieira gives you that Odegaard that would go together well with Odegaard is that he does all the key passes, the assists, like his expected assists and expected goals and key passes per 90 would actually marry up really well with what Odegaard does in midfield. So I actually think Fabio Vieira and Odegaard do complement each other well, but there's different horses for courses. It doesn't mean because Kai Havertz offers the height and off the ball stuff. So, certain game states suit Fabio Vieira more. But the idea that Odegaard and Fabio Vieira can't play well together is a fallacy. I actually think they're yin and yang, quite similarly to Saliba and Gabriel and Saka and Martinelli. What they do and what they don't do marry well together to create a balanced midfield. But you're not going to see it very often, especially because we have to make Kai Havertz work right now. But the idea that we're going to move Kai Havertz to the other side is wild to me. Boy says Odegaard is an orchestrator. We are very fortunate that his impact shows in the top layer of stats. Exactly. It's hard to describe because if you have the number 10 or the number 8 on your back, you're expected to be a certain type of player all the time. But Odegaard really is like he controls the game for us. That's the only way I can really describe it, and yes, he can get the odd assist or something like that, but he really sets up other players to be that guy, and he just does a really good job at it. He's perfect at it. It's his job. He's great at it. Tawana says, going forward, yes, give me Fabio all day, but we have to be defensively sound as well. Different, like I said, there's different, game states for maybe Fabio, but, I think with Arsenal being, unless we're playing against the better teams, like we are supposed to be one of the best teams in the league. I think playing anybody from like 8 down, we should feel confident having Fabio Vieira in our midfield. Like we should be imposing ourselves on the opposition. We should be in charge. We should have possession. And so if we have 68, 70% possession, then I don't see why Fabio Vieira would be some sort of issue. I think it's really overstated that we have to have this physical team out there if the other team is, is viewed as a physical team, because we're talking about like taking out so many games where Fabio Vieira can't play. And why is he here if he can't play in so many of the games? Like, only play him in Europe and against like the bottom 3 sides. Like he played against Brentford last season and Wolves. He's fine. Like he just needed to bulk up a little bit more. And now that he has, like, I just don't see why he can't play any games. Colin says, honest question, what would we be saying if Xhaka had the first 4 game performances as Kai has put in? Based on the season that he had last season, I'd still feel like Xhaka could do better. Xhaka had changed our whole view on like what he could do, and so he unlocked the goals and assists. And if Xhaka got the ball that dropped to him, that dropped to Kai Havertz against United, that's 1-0 Arsenal. So yeah, I'd be disappointed if Xhaka had given away that pass in the middle of the field to Odegaard, and United went down the other end and scored. I'd be disappointed by the performances that we've seen. I feel like actually like I'd be more disappointed because I actually think Xhaka, is somebody that we've come to say that has consistent performances. So Kai Havertz, I think I've been even more lenient because it's like he's not used to playing with our team and all this kind of stuff. But Xhaka from last season, putting in the performances that Kai is putting in now, I think we'd be disappointed, because Xhaka was putting up performances of a lifetime, last season, So, yeah. Tawana says, Xhaka's mentality is different though. And that's another part is like we've replaced somebody with immense confidence, leadership, somebody with so much experience, confidence, with somebody who lacks confidence, is not a leader, is not loud, and is kind of like does not have anywhere near the same personality. Now we put in Declan Rice, who should maybe compensate for that, but we have a player in there that is so shy and timid in a position that was more commanding and confident, got on the ball, made shit happen. So yeah, there's just a lot of difference, but Yeah, Blaze says Arsenal fans are so obsessed with defensively and physicality. It's just become boring. Arteta always wants to play a holding defensive midfielder in 2-8s. I kind of feel the same way. I think we're overly like invested in it. Like it does worry me about Beto and their set pieces, but it's mostly that because I feel like we're going to have the ball. And so I want the best players on the ball because I feel like what we do with it is more important than what we do without it because we're going to have the ball the most. Like we should be, or else something has gone so wrong. And so the idea that Fabio Vieira cannot play in any games that are physical when we know that he's going to be small in almost every single game. Like what team in the Premier League is not physical at all that Fabio can play against? I don't know if I understand it, but there you go. There you go. Next up is so yeah, no to the new positions, but I understand what you guys are saying. And but I just think we'd be doing way too much, to be honest. The 25-man squad for the Premier League has been named by Arsenal, and I would love to show it to you guys. We have, let's see, let's start with here. Okay, so 25-man squad has been announced. I will move this. We had the asterisks are the homegrown, Mohamed El Neni, Kai Havertz, James Hilson, whoever you are, Gabriel Jesus, Jorginho, Kivior, Gabriel Magalhaes, Gabriel Martinelli, Reece Nelson, Eddie Nketiah, Martin Odegaard, Thomas Partey, and Aaron Ramsdale. The second part of the list is David Raya, Declan Rice, Bukayo Saka, Bukayo Saka, William Saliba, Emil Smith-Rowe, Cedric Suarez, Jurrien Timber, Takehiro Tomiyasu, Leandro Trossard, Fabio Vieira, Ben White, and Alexander Zinchenko. You know what I'm going to say. Timber in there. Timber made it. Like he wasn't added into the 25-man squad for the Champions League, but he can be added in January. Him being in the squad gives me a little bit of hope that I probably should not have. I still feel like he was going to be the signing of the summer for us. He just was going to give us so much. And so I am hoping that he comes back well and as quickly as possible, but not rushed. But him being in this on this roster gives me a little bit of hope that I probably should not have. But it's not that much different than the Champions League one. The Champions League one had El Neni and had Cedric, and I know people were upset by it, but I don't think we need to rush the likes of Nweri or Miles Lewis-Skelly or anybody like that into this right now. I don't think we're in a desperate situation where we need to have them in the team. Next season is a different story. I think Thomas Partey may potentially leave, as well as Jorginho. And so that opens up some, space for players like that. And if we can give them meaningful minutes and not waste their time, then maybe you can integrate them into the team. But if you can't, there's still like, there's, you can send them out on meaningful loans, but seeing Jurrien Timber on there just makes me so happy. I'm hoping that there's a chance. Do you know what I mean? I just like him so much. I miss Timber. And it's crazy to miss a player that like only played 3 games for your club, but he just fit in so well. Hugo says also excited about Sousa. Social Join says Cedric is a Terminator. He just never dies, does he? Tawana says, oh yeah, you guys are talking to each other. Football is more about tactics all day, every day. Colin says Cedric will be carrying the water bottles for the physios. I'm not too worried about him being there, if I'm honest. I just don't think we'll really see him unless something like terrible happens. But yeah, it is what it is. Social Join says, to be fair to Lino Sousa, should be get a few minutes if Rico Lewis gets minutes at City. I think, if you're good enough, you're old enough, but we also need to be very careful. There's a fine line between, there's Jack Wilshere and then there's like wasting somebody's time. And you have to find the perfect balance of not relying on them so much that they break down in their 20s, um, but also not having them in the team without the ability to give them meaningful minutes. And you have to also trust them to take those minutes and feel confident enough to do something with them. And I think with Arsenal right now, we're under so much pressure that we don't actually have the breathing room to have Noweri and them in the team. But if we were to progress next season and, be in a position where we're not under so much stress and pressure, meaning we have won something this season, then you can move Jorginho on and maybe a couple of others, get them in the team and give them meaningful minutes, maybe in the Premier League against lower level sides or in the Carabao Cup or FA Cup. But it's a very, very fine line where sometimes it's just better to let them go on a loan so that they can play day in and day out and actually get that experience. There's very few players that I feel like are good enough to be like get integrated into the team and play good minutes. Saka is a unicorn, and that's why you don't see many of them come through. So yeah, Geeks of Muckleby says Timber is going to be a club legend. I mean, I just love him. John Donut says, Jess, I keep hoping that he can come back in January. I'm hoping that Arsenal not going out into the market and bringing in a center back means that they feel like he could come back, but at the same time, you don't want him rushed. So we'll see. I mean, it happened so early. It happened in like August. So we'll see. We will see. Tawana says, okay, let them show me at the end of the season. Colin says, same, Jess, Timber is a baller. I mean, what a player, man. So good. So sad what happened to him. Like, not just from us, but from our perspective or from his perspective, to get your dream move and for you to get injured in the first half of your first game in the Premier League and the type of injury is very, very, very harsh. So I hope for like mentally he's doing well, because it had to have broken his heart, Geeks of Muckleby says, correct, Jess. We do not want to overburden them and ruin their careers like Super Jack or Michael Owen. I worry for Saka. We need to ensure we can rest him. He's looking a bit jaded. I don't think there's anything wrong with maybe playing, Reece Nelson here and there. I think, there's no point in giving Reece Nelson that new contract if you're not going to give him any minutes. And he's there to provide respite for Saka and Martinelli, I think. So, give him more than the last 5 minutes of a game. I think giving somebody a new contract and then not trusting them to play good minutes is terrible. I think it sends the wrong message. Players will not sign new deals if they see that when you sign new deals, you're not trusted. And I think Nketiah got a little bit of that, in his kind of first, after he signed that new deal, he didn't play at all. And Reece Nelson is kind of in that same category. They need to be trusted. If they're not trusted, then why are we giving them new deals? Let's see. Philip says Partey and Timber out for the Arsenal versus City home game means pretty much kiss the title goodbye. In my opinion, should focus on the cups. No, it's too early for that. Colin says Roel Walters is the one I cannot wait to get a showing. He's an exciting player. Tell me this, I'll tell you this. Says Cedric gets paid how much to do what? Train 4 days a week. He's on £75,000 per week. That was a bad deal. John Donut says also, Arteta also said Trossard would start games in the UCL. I didn't see that he said that, but Trossard is a grown-up. He should be trusted to play meaningful minutes. He played really well coming in January, and I know he's not the same as Martinelli in terms of style, but in terms of can he play the Arsenal way? Yes. Is he experienced enough to add true value to the team? Yes. Has he played well enough to deserve minutes? Yes. So I'm expecting Trossard to get more minutes soon. Nandish says the club forces the under-21s to play in the same formation in the first team do. Arteta does watch some of their games at Meadow Park. He should definitely be giving them chances over Cedric, etc. Not necessarily. I still feel like, There's watching them play and thinking that they're good and integrating them into the team at the right time. And so Cedric will be gone soon. Like Cedric will leave. We'll have a couple players leave, and that'll open up natural spots for them. But to have Cedric and be paying him 75,000 pounds per week, have him not suiting up at all, and having a kid on the bench that could be getting useful minutes and the under 21s are on a loan, sitting on our bench, never playing, doesn't necessarily make sense. I know people just don't want to see Cedric and they want to be excited by new academy players, but right time, right place is so, so important, I think. So yeah. But yeah, you guys, it's been an hour and 30 minutes. I wanted to do a little bit more on is Saka struggling, but we might have to push that to tomorrow because it's evergreen and people will be still saying it tomorrow. So come back tomorrow and we'll talk about whether or not Saka is actually struggling or if people just being effing dramatic as usual. I can be dramatic, but I can tell when people are really overdoing it. And Saka being struggling is something that I'm like, that don't make no sense. But I really enjoyed talking to you guys. There's 230 of you guys in here. I am working on a really, really, really exciting guest for our first post-match podcast / YouTube show for the Everton game. So stay tuned for that. And again, like I said, memberships will change. They will actually be on Patreon starting next week. So I'm going to get rid of memberships and then you can re-sign up on Patreon. You'll get previews and what are they called? When you rewatch the games, you'll get rewatches as well as the opportunity to send in members' questions for the actual post-match games or post-match podcasts and stuff like that. So I'll give you guys a bigger rundown once I nail everything down. But I love you guys so, so much. Make sure you guys like the video and subscribe to the channel on the way out. And I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.